Okay, well, I do show it is 3 o'clock Mountain Standard Time. So let me just do some quick introductions. So welcome to today's webinar. My name is Mike Peterson, and I'll be helping to moderate the webinar today with my associate, Taylor Magleby. So we work for Language Dynamics Group. We produce and sell the Story Champs, Pearl, and Cubed products. And the topic of the webinar today is building strong oral language skills with Story Champs. So Dr. Trina Spencer will be presenting the webinar today. Dr. Spencer is one of the creators of Story Champs, so a huge thank you for Trina for being here. And a couple little notes here. So today's webinar, it will be recorded and posted on the Language Dynamics Group website for review. So for questions during the webinar, we'd like you to use the Q&A box at the bottom of your screen. So we will not be using the raise your hand option. But again, the Q&A box would be perfect. Taylor and I will be posting links in the chat box during the webinar, and feel free to interact with us in the chat as well if you have questions or comments. And then for any requests for certificates of attendance, Taylor will take care of those. And she'll go ahead and put her email in the chat. So if you need a certificate, go ahead and email Taylor. She'll shoot that right out to you. So with all that being said, we'll hand it over to you, Trina.
All right. Hello, everybody. I'm so glad you joined us this evening. For me, it's Friday evening, and for some, it might still be afternoon. Anyway, the topic today is a really big one. And so I have a lot of material, and thanks to Mike and Taylor, because they're going to be managing the chat. I'm likely the chat and the Q&A. I will likely not look at that so that I can just keep going through my material. And of course, it's going to be fast because I want to get through a lot. So if there really is a pressing question, Taylor or Mike can, slow me down and interrupt me, okay? And for sure, because it's a lot of material all at once, you may want to go back to it and review it at another time. It'll be recorded on our website. Okay, I'm going to share my screen so everyone can see my slides, and we're going to get going. Okay, so here's our topic today. Like Mike said, I'm one of the developers. The other developer is Doug Peterson, and he might be hanging around somewhere. He's my great partner in crime. So we're going to jump in and answer the question, what is Story Champs? Well, Story Champs is a multi-tiered academic language curriculum for diverse students in pre-K to third grade and beyond if they have such disabilities that puts their language in a lower developmental band. And it can be delivered by paraprofessionals, teachers, literacy specialists, SLPs, and parents and families, of course. So I'm excited that you're here to either get an introduction to Story Champs or already know a little bit about Story Champs and want to see everything that it can do. Those are kind of like two different objectives, right? So I'm going to give a little bit of an introduction and like, why do we even need Story Champs? And then the second part will be like, how powerful is it? Like, how far can I take my kids and my students and my clients using Story Champs? So hopefully we get both of those in. If you want more information on any one of those area topics, there are other recorded webinars that will give you more specifics, like on vocabulary and more specifics on writing, etc. Okay, so this is the simple view of reading. Reading, we know, is the product of decoding and language, and one without the other is insufficient to produce skilled reading. So as our simple diagram of simple view of reading, let me just show you the more complex one. This is the not so simple view of reading, where we have very complicated intricacies of strands that are woven together, braided together, and then braided again, right? Because we do have to have language comprehension and we have to have decoding, and that equals reading comprehension. Now, this is really important because it sets the stage for why we need Story Champs. So here's the problem that Story Champs aims to solve, right? And this is quoted, this quote is drawn from Common Core State Standards. While systematically teaching decoding leads to improved performance on early reading evaluations, which focus on decoding skills, American educators have yet to find an analogous remedy that leads to improved test scores in the later grades. Note that I said leads to improved test scores in later grades when the focus shifts from shifts to assessing whether students understand what they read. Now, the reason why I emphasize that point is it doesn't say they have yet to find an analogous remedy for later reading instruction. That's not what they're saying. They're saying a remedy that leads to improved test scores later when comprehension becomes the focus. All right, this is critical. All right, we know from research, it's well accepted that the chief cause of the achievement gap between socioeconomic groups is a language gap. And if you don't know who Hirsch is, you should follow everything and anything he writes, because he writes prolifically about this. And he's actually one of the leaders for the core knowledge that he's pursuing throughout our country. All right, so academic language is the pivotal skill repertoire for closing the achievement gap, and attention to it is nearly absent in primary grades. Well, we aim to bring attention to it in primary grades. So here's just an expanded image of academic language. Just a quick definition: it's specialized language, both in oral and written forms, used to acquire and use knowledge, right? So academic language is made up of discourse structures. And I use the term discourse as opposed to text structures so that we're clear that this is oral discourse as well as written discourse, okay? And it's kind of like the structure of that entire language sample, whether it's written or oral. We also have complex sentences, the uses of adverbial clauses, temporal and causal subordination, elaborated noun phrases. This is part of academic language. Vocabulary, of course, duh, everyone knows that. But there are different kinds of vocabulary. There's general academic vocabulary words, and then there's domain-specific academic vocabulary words that are typically used for content like science and social studies. We also need to have morphological knowledge. Oftentimes morphological skills are taught within decoding, but they're actually related to meaning, because morphemes are the smallest units of meaning within a word, like roots, suffixes, and prefixes, okay? Oh, and then lastly, we have inferential thinking. This is kind of the glue, right? This is what makes good comprehenders. Because if we have good discourse structures, complex sentences, good vocabulary, and we understand morphological components, then we can make inferences about what's going on in that language, written or oral. That inferential thinking is part cognitive, part linguistic, and it allows us to make predictions, solve problems, hypothesize, and make connections based on the background knowledge that is available to us from our history and from the text versus spoken or written text. Okay, so here's another way of looking at this. We know language is often divided into receptive and expressive. But we understand now, research knows very well that listening and speaking are actually the foundations of reading and writing. So if we have a rocky or like an unlevel or missing foundation, we will not get reading and writing skills from the kids in our schools. So we must pay special attention to that foundation and create a firm foundation, both in receptive and expressive language, so that reading and writing can be built upon that listening and speaking foundation. So why did we choose stories? Why are we using stories for our foundation? Well, this is a great quote. It's because story is a basic principle of mind. Most of our experience, our knowledge, and our thinking is organized as stories. If you just think about it for a second, we even use the word narrative to help explain what's going on in our political climate, to help us explain and understand what's going on in our racial climate, in our economic climate. It is a principle of mind that we use just to keep our own sanity. So, quick definition of a story is narratives are causally related events told or retold in temporal order. That's kind of a quick and dirty one. But let's talk a little bit more about why narratives are so important. I already mentioned that they're a sense-making device, right? That's how we think. We think in stories, so they help us make sense. But stories are also the best predictors of academic performance. So children who are good storytellers, young kids, like at the age of 5, their narrative skills predict their reading performance out several years later, even 10 years later. And in fact, next to vocabulary, narrative skills, the ability to retell and tell stories, is the best predictor of academic achievement. And we often don't know that. We only hear about vocabulary. So narratives are also very integrated. And what I mean by that is all those academic language things that I unpacked a few minutes ago are integrated into a story, right? But not just language. There's also cognitive elements. There's short-term memory, executive functioning, attention, theory of mind, perspective taking. All these things are actually integrated into a narrative too. So when we work on narratives, we work on a lot more than just telling a story. So it's kind of magical in that way. It's also, storytelling is also like the common medium for socialization. And if you don't believe me, just the next time you're hanging out with your friends, just count the number of storytelling exchanges that go on, right? Really, it's about I'm telling a story, then you tell a story on a similar topic, and then it morphs, right? And that's actually fun. That's a way we engage socially, and it's the normal, practical, appropriate way to do that. And some kids, maybe children who have language difficulties or other types of disabilities, struggle to be able to do that. And no wonder that there's such high correlation between language difficulties and social emotional problems and behavior problems. So stories are also very culturally relevant, right? They're culturally grounded, they have cultural purposes. You know, we know many cultures use storytelling to transmit cultural knowledge, and that stories can be adapted and made more culturally relevant. They're also very useful in schools, right? The 80s and 90s were very good at articulating how important retelling as a procedure was for schools. They've kind of lost favor, but they shouldn't. They need to come back. So we're trying to push how useful they are. And they are ubiquitous. I already mentioned we do it all the time. It's very common. And so as a result of it, it makes instruction that takes advantage of oral storytelling very useful to the clients and students we're trying to work with. All right, so this graphic is just an overview of kind of the structure of a story. So if you start there on the yellow one, and we say, you know, in our story champs, we start with character, problem, feeling, action, consequence, some sort of ending to that story, right? And then there are, you can build up, and you should build up as children get better at telling stories. You want to add on these pieces. You want to add the setting and the ending. You want to add a plan and feelings. And then eventually it's like a double episode story, meaning we have multiple problems, attempts to solve the problem, and, you know, maybe an unresolved problem or conflict of sorts. Now, when you have children with really significant delays, like very significant, you might need to simplify the story to just a problem, action, consequence, right? Beginning, middle, and end. And oftentimes that's what our early pre-K academic standards look and sound like. We try to give a little bit more specific names, and you'll see as I unfold the information about story champs how that works. All right. In addition to the structure for the story at the discourse level, we need to have complex language that gives the structure at the sentence level. All right, so there's kind of two layers of structure here. We call this language complexity. The storyteller must create a context for the listener almost exclusively through the use of complex, sophisticated language. All right, so here's some examples of complex sentence structures. So causal subordinate clauses. Javon was frustrated because he could not reach his hat. A temporal subordinate clause could say when Javon stood on a stool, he could reach his hat, right? These subordinate clauses are great for young kids as early as preschool. Certainly by the time they are in kindergarten, first grade, they should be using causal and temporal subordinate clauses, and that teachers and SLPs should not be avoiding them either, so that we could model those structures for our kiddos. And then elaborated noun phrases. These kind of emerge a little bit later than the subordinate clauses, but they're really important. Javon, who was short for his age, right? That elaborates the noun. That relative pronoun, who, with the relative clause, who was short for his age, provide elaboration for Javon, right? There's lots of those in written language, but if we can integrate those things into our oral language, kids are gonna learn the structures quicker and better. All right, this is just a quick overview of the Common Core state standards for kindergarten that call out something related to storytelling, okay? And in fact, we've done some crosswalks about almost 50% of the kindergarten English language arts standards are related to and can be taught in story champs. And these are just a couple of them. right? But I want you to see that our academic standards are replete with objectives about storytelling. So understand and use narrative language to describe people, place, things, locations, events, actions, create and tell an original story, answer questions regarding literal recall and understanding of the details of who, what, where, when, identify and express mental states and emotions of self and others, right? I mentioned the social significance of stories. There it is in our standards. We also integrate lots of things like prepositions just by default of the language. They're in stories, right? How about retell important facts and information? So this one is more about expository language. Well, guess what? Story Champ's got lessons for those too. So I want to show you what it looks like in third grade. And in third grade in my state, there is a state exam that everybody must pass, otherwise they get held back. It's pretty important. Well, guess what? I'm going to show you like 3 or 4 questions from the state ELA exam and show you that they are just about narratives. So they read a passage, right? They read a narrative, and then they answer this question. Which sentence describes the man's feelings, right? There you go. What happens in this passage because of the man's feelings? They're actually talking about like, what does he do to kind of fix his problem, right? All right, and this one, what is the meaning of anxious as it's used in this passage, right? So it gives you the little blurb here. Well, guess what? You need inferencing skills to be able to do that. And you need to be able to understand the events of the problem and the emotion. Like, how are these two connected to be able to say that, guess what? He's actually worried, right? As opposed to angry, excited, or sad. All right. And then in this one, the question is, it shows the beginning of the main character's problem, which is exactly the answer to this question. And this is the language that we use in Story Champs, and we teach children as young as 3 years old to identify a character and character's problem and the feeling attached to it. So that by the time they're in the 3rd grade, they got this stuff down pat, right? We don't need to be worrying about it anymore because they learned it back when they were young. And remember that the solution needs to lead to changes in the comprehension test scores when they're in the 3rd grade. It doesn't mean that it has to we have to wait until 3rd grade to work on the solution. All right, so this is just a summary before I moved into Story Champs specifically. This is what we know from research. We know that we should be promoting language with the same vigor as decoding, right? Decoding can't go away. Language comprehension cannot replace decoding. We must work on both of them equally. We need to begin as soon as children enter school. We cannot wait until they're failing the state exams in 3rd grade to work on language. It's not going to work. Language requires longer, more intensive, explicit instruction, right? Especially, it even requires longer, more explicit instruction than decoding does. Yet we're not even doing it in schools. We need to have a sustained focus on language into college, right? Because language builds. And I'm a professor in college, and guess what I see? Students are not prepared to write or to speak orally using academic language. They're very ill prepared coming out of high school in terms of oral and written language abilities. We need to teach the most essential academic language skills, which I unpacked with the academic language graphic. And we need to start with simple stories because they help make sense of our world and build towards more complex stories and different forms of academic language, right? Like information, written, okay, speeches, essays, all of those things. That's where we're heading. But we want to start early. We want to get the kids a really strong oral language foundation in listening and speaking so we can build upon that with reading and writing. All right, so Story Champs is our solution. Ta-da! We built Story Champs because we believe that schools and clinicians needed flexible options to address the diverse language needs that are in our schools. And there are so many language needs. And it's not just kids with language disabilities. It's not just kids with autism. It's all kids. But there are some populations like English language learners that need more explicit language instruction. Okay, so we developed this so that it fits within a multi-tiered system of support framework in which the assessment drives the movement and flexibility and adaptation for this intervention to be appropriate for all these diverse learners. So some kids might be great if they just get it from the classroom teacher. Other kids might need a little extra dose from like a speech language pathologist, a paraprofessional, a special ed teacher, a reading specialist. And then there might be some at the top of that tier that really need an intensive one-on-one instruction. So that's how we built Story Champs. So it would be good for all of them. All right, so the key features of Story Champs is that it's manualized, but it's flexible. I know these are somewhat, it's somewhat oxymoronic, but it's true. We need to have something that's manualized so that we will make sure that the active ingredients remain intact, but flexible enough that we can do all of those things that we said we would, right? So our key features are carefully structured stories, engaging visual materials, and explicit teaching procedures. And I'm just gonna touch on some of these really quickly, okay? So this is what our materials look like. We have storybooks, we have illustrations that go with the stories, icons that represent the story grammar elements of like character setting, problem, feeling, action, ending, consequence, plan, and feeling, all of those, okay? We also have games. There's a lot of games. We have peer tutoring games and materials and other games that when kids are in small group that they get to play. And then we have more visuals, and we have a flash drive that has tons of stuff on it. You can print it out however you want to, laminate things, send them home with your kids, take home, extra stuff for classroom use. Lots of possibilities here. So I'm gonna skip that. So this is what the digital, what I didn't tell you is on the flash drive is a digital presentation of all of our illustrations and our visual materials. And you would pick a story from this and click into it, looks something like this. And from this view, you could be showing your students either in the classroom on an iPad or remotely through Zoom these illustrations, and you can move the icons to as you need them for the lesson. So it's very versatile. We do, I want to just make note here that the digital presentation is not any different. It comes with the standard Story Champs kit. But since COVID, the digital presentation has been used more often because more clinicians and teachers are providing e-learning. And there is a video webinar specifically on how to do that. And there's a video of me teaching a little 3 or 4-year-old girl a lesson. So you can see how that works and how easy it is. These are Story Champs starters when kids are ready to generalize outside of the stories that we provide in the Story Champs program. So when they're ready to generate their own. These are the basic levels that we work on. Sorry, they're not all basic. We have basically 4 levels, a basic, which is just the 5 parts that were in that yellow, the orange box in that one graphic. Character, problem, feeling, action, ending. This would be appropriate for preschool at the beginning of kindergarten. But by, mid-kindergarten, I would want to see kids advance to the enhanced level, which lines with our level B stories, character setting, problem, feeling, action, ending, and feeling. And then by the time they're in 1st grade, we should be adding a couple more components and making some clarifications. We want to add the plan, which means that the character is thinking critically about what needs to be done, and it's putting goal direction into the character. And then we separate the ending into a consequence and an ending. They're kind of like 2 elements, right? And then by level J, so C through I level, sorry, the enhanced is really appropriate for like 1st grade into 2nd grade. But by the end of 2nd grade, I'd like to see kids in the advanced level, and 3rd grade and up, if they're typically developing, they should be doing level J, which means there's 2 episodes in those stories. So they're complex. The first attempt to solve the problem doesn't work. So it's an unresolved problem. And so they've got to try again, which is appropriate for, getting kids to think about novel writing or, short stories, that kind of thing. All right, so this is what the storybook looks like. We have 2 types of stories in our storybook. There's classic stories and they're blitz stories, and they have slightly different purposes. Classic stories are meant to be the first introduction to Story Champs and to storytelling. They're very simple stories with little additional academic language, right? So we don't have vocabulary words planted in those stories. We've made them very simple. So children with disabilities and young preschoolers can start somewhere that the story doesn't overwhelm them. So they have the basic story structure in them. And then there is a level B for enhanced story structure in case the children's first exposure to Story Champs is in kindergarten. They would want to start with a classic stories level B. The blitz stories then have additional targets embedded in them. We've planted them in there so that teachers and clinicians can be strategic about what they have their kids say. And in that way, like, let's say I have a story with lots of good vocabulary, complex language, and a good story grammar structure. I can have kids working on different objectives in the same Story Champs intervention. right? You just got to choose a good story so that you're able to model it for them over and over again. We also have a bilingual version. This is a translation of our Story Champs stories so that the stories can actually be done in the same time frame. And if you have, let's say, Spanish-speaking kiddos and you have the ability to speak Spanish, you might want to provide that story in Spanish first and then do the story in English, because it gives them more comprehension, more language to understand, and then they can practice the language in English. All right, so here's an example of a level A classic story. See, it's pretty simple. This is like the simplest version. At the bottom, you have the icons for character, problem, feeling, action, ending. Those are the main pieces, and those would be the targets for story structure. Now, embedded in this story is a because, a then, and a when. So if your kiddos were ready to use those complex sentences, then you can have them do that. Now, there are some vocabulary words there, but remember, they're not planted in the story. So it's not usually my recommendation to work on vocabulary in level A stories. I usually save those for blitz stories. So here's a blitz story. It's also a level A, and level A means character, problem, feeling, action, ending. But because it's a blitz story, it has additional things built into it, and it is the words, right? We actually have 4 what we would call general academic words, and we call them sparkle. So the 4 words are disappointed, ruined, gulped, and delectable. And the storybook has the definitions for you, some child-friendly definitions, right? But 2 of those words, gulped and delectable, actually have clues planted in this story so that you can use the story to help kids figure out the meaning of the words by using context clues, right? So that's planted on purpose so that we can teach that kind of skill. So the illustrations that would go with a level A would be these 5. And if you're using blitz stories, but at a level A, then you would want to use panels 1, 2, 3, 7, and 8. There's actually 8 panels for the blitz stories. And that's because the blitz stories go all the way up to the J, where you would use all 8 panels in that very complex level J advanced story grammar. And those little icons mean sparkle. And so you can work on gulped and delectable in the context of the level A story. Here is the level J story, right? Look at all the icons across the bottom. Notice that there are 2 reds and 2 greens. That's intentional, okay? But look at all the words that are embedded in there. We've got cluttered, sweltering, disappointed, liquefied, gooey, right? This is for a late 2nd grader, 3rd grader, and up. These are complex stories that we're going to require a lot of short-term memory and the ability to speak in complex sentences and use difficult vocabulary words. Okay, so these are the 8 panels. You see 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. They're labeled. And so in a level J, you would need all 8 of them. So we have lesson plans for large group, small group, and one-on-one. And this is important because as you go up the pyramid, right, to smaller groups or smaller numbers, you increase the opportunities to respond. And that's what makes it more intensive. You can also have more explicit and individualized targets as the group size shrinks. And you can have more specialized prompting, contingent feedback based on errors they're making. But if your group is a whole group, it's really hard to do that. You can also increase intensity by having more frequent sessions, increasing the duration of sessions, and relying on instructors with greater expertise. Like a speech language pathologist leading the intervention might be more intensive than if you have a paraprofessional doing it, okay? So our master lesson plans are actually on the flash drive, okay? And they're on the flash drive because there's 65 of them. And each of you are going to need different lesson plans. And so we didn't print them out and give you the cost of it. We want you to save the money and just print out the 1 or 2 that you need, maybe laminate it, put it in a binder so that it's there for you. But you can see that it's organized based on the size of your group, because teachers are going to go with the large group, specialists are going to go with small group, and then your special educators are going to go with the individual ones. The table of contents will help you organize and make your selection of the different master lesson plans. So large group, small group, individual lessons, and then there are some add-ons. And the add-ons are kind of the way that we add some complexity, right? So you're doing this lesson really well with these kids, but now they're ready to like take on a larger, or they're able to tell with more complexity, especially around vocabulary. I like my vocabulary lessons in there. All right, so generally speaking, we try to order our lessons so that they're getting oral lessons before writing. right? And that's where I'm passing that along to you too, because it's ultimately up to the practitioner to determine what lessons they're going to give these kids. But kids are not really ready for writing lessons until they've got a strong oral language foundation. All right. It's also easier to retell a story than it is to generate a story, with the exception if you have English language learners who have pretty good generation skills, but their comprehension is delayed because they don't understand the English language. That would be the case where their generation would be better than their retell. Personal stories are generally easier than fictional stories. And being able to generate a story with pictures is easier than no pictures. Now, of course, these are generic, and it's not true with every little thing, but it's a general guideline. So the manual for Story Champs is also on the flash drive, and we've done our very best to make it simple and graphically organized, and so you just get the meat of it and not a whole lot of extra stuff. I do recommend reading it because it'll teach you how to use each of the pieces, all the material that's in the kit. So this is a quick start guide, and all of our kits come with this. It's a printed kind of cardboardy kind of thing, and this will give you some suggestions for how to get started and how to plan your instruction across the year. Okay, so the quick start guide has the materials, then one for preschool, one for kindergarten, and notice that I have these arranged based on your academic standards, right? Because teachers in the classroom need to know how they're addressing their standards, and SLPs need to know how they're supporting the instruction towards standards. So this can help you. In addition, at the bottom of these quick start guides is kind of a sequence of teaching, of lessons, if your kids are like average to high versus kids who are more low, right? So these are, again, just general guidelines, take it or leave it, but it's my professional opinion based on all of the research that we've done. All right, so I'm going to tell you quickly about our lesson plans. So the effective teaching cycle is embedded in every single one of our lessons. Now, lessons start with new material. Then you give kids guided practice, then independent practice, and then finally you push for generalization. This is how language works. This is how most instruction works. Let me break that down to you in a lesson plan. So here's a basic story structure, large group master lesson plan. At the top, we have just information so you know what story to use, what icons to use, what materials you're going to need, and consider any add-on lessons. But the bulk of the lesson plan right here is, I'm breaking it down for you so you can see where's the new material. Oh, it's modeling the story, right? We got to introduce a new story for us to practice. And it's really important that we introduce a new story every lesson. These are not storybooks and they do not need to be repeated in consecutive lessons. But so we model a new story, right? We give them a little practice with the story grammar icons. Then we play story gestures and we do a team retell. So we provide some guided practice. And then at the very end, they do a partner retell where they're doing independent practice with each other. Now I'll show you in a minute. Actually, this lesson, I have the generalization component is in it, right? So this lesson is a basic story structure. These are both small group, and this one is enhanced story structure. So let's look at this one a little bit. So there's the model, new material, team retell is guided practice. Then there's independent practice. 2 children get an individual retell practice. Then on the next side, we say, has something like that ever happened to you? So now we're asking them to generalize to a story about something that happened to them, making it personally relevant and giving them language practice on something that's immediately useful to them. That's how we integrate the generalization. I do want to make note here too that the visual materials are strategically faded in these steps so that as the lesson goes on, there are fewer and fewer visual supports to support the children. So they get more and more independent and more reliant on their short-term memory. Okay, so we have a lot of literature about what makes instruction effective, and we have integrated those into Story Champs instruction. And that's why it's important that you use the lesson plans on the flash drive, because that's where the effective instruction is. Okay, so multiple exemplar training, let me tell you this. I started to say that it's important that you use new stories every lesson. That's because we don't want children memorizing stories. Otherwise, all we teach them is how to tell this story. What we're trying to do is teach them how to tell stories and what the schema or the structure of stories is. So in this example, these illustrations represent 4 different stories, okay? And in each of those stories, the same structure or the same story narrative structure exists. So that schema, right, is shown through multiple exemplars, okay? And what happens is children are able to understand, oh, I get it. These are parts of the stories that are relevant to all stories, not just this one, right? But if we teach on consecutive days with the same story, all they're going to do is memorize that story, and it's like words on a page as opposed to the discourse structure that we're after. All right, so we also include active responding games and peer tutoring. I mentioned that before. So on the left, we have games when kids are in small groups and one kid is telling a story and the other kids are playing games. And this one, the champ checks is when we're in a large group setting and 2 kids are paired to tell the story to each other, and they're doing this little peer tutoring where they can check and help each other. Tons of fun. I love the social benefits of the games and the champ checks and peer tutoring that we do. Okay, so we also use a very explicit 2-step prompting procedure, and it's taken us through research to figure out what works best. So I'm passing that along. A 2-step prompting procedure, when we're trying to get kids to tell all parts of the stories, looks like this. The interventionist first says, let's say the child missed the part of the story, like forgot to say what the problem was. And we'd say, well, wait just a second. What was his problem? Right? So WH question. And then if the child is still struggling, then we'd follow it up with a model. Here, he crashed on his bike, right? We would model it and then we'd ask the child to say it. Here, you say it. He crashed on his bike, right? That's 2-step prompting. And it's important that we don't do these slow hierarchies, because kids can become frustrated and they may not understand what it is you want them to say. So it's easier to just model so that they can be successful and you can move on. So another type of go-to correction is when we're trying to get kids to use big words or complex sentences. There's not really a question that you can ask that's going to be helpful, right? And so really you just come up with it and say, hey, say what I say, right? And model the sentence for them and ask them to repeat it, right? And we want to focus on saying it correctly rather than spending any time talking about what they did incorrectly. So this right here is a take-home lesson. We have them for level A and B stories, and the Spanish version has Spanish stories so that they go home with the kids in Spanish. These are additional activities that are on the flash drive. These are for sequencing. So if you've got kids who can benefit from sequencing, either with or without the icons, and then kids who are ready to kind of draw their own stories or write their own stories. This is specifically designed for kids to draw their stories and then dictate to to a teacher or somebody, and then you can staple them together and give them a book. They can take it home, be so proud. All right, we got to the portion of this that I want to take a minute to talk about what else Story Champs can do. It's rather easy to learn to use the basic Story Champs lessons and teach story grammar and maybe some complex sentences. But the most common thing that I hear is that kids get bored, and they're bored because the teacher or clinician doesn't know what else to do. So I want to encourage you to really shoot for the stars, and that Story Champs is actually, I want to emphasize that Story Champs is made to help you shoot for the stars, right? But the problem is when you're new to it, you can't quite get your brain around how to do all those other things. And so oftentimes you have to come back later and go, oh yeah, that's what I can do next. Okay, because remember, there are 65 lesson plans and you might start with one, but you need to ratchet them up as your students gain language skills. Okay, so I'm just going to give you a quick, some quick examples about what can be done. All right, so you can increase the story grammar. Remember, I told you the 4 levels: basic, enhanced, enhanced plus, advanced. The only thing about the story grammar is you don't want to move kids past what is developmentally recommended or what is going on in their age group or their grade level, right? So basic is, again, preschool. Enhanced would be kindergarten, 1st grade. Enhanced plus would be kind of like 1st to 2nd grade, and advanced would be 2nd and 3rd grade, okay? And so there are lessons in the add-on section that can help you move from the enhanced to enhanced plus, okay? Because enhanced plus, you actually add in additional story grammar icons of plan, and then you clarify consequence, right? So it tells you what lessons to be using, what kind of stories to be using, and these are the icons that you're now introducing. So you're basically saying, my kids have got these 7 pieces down. So character setting, problem, feeling, action, ending, and feeling. Now I need to add in plan and consequence and ending in the stories are kind of like grouped together a little bit, but at this point you can separate them by introducing this new icon. Kids are able to learn what a consequence is and how that's different than an ending. In our stories, there's always a main character and a secondary character. There's always a setting that includes things like action and location, right? An activity and location. There's usually a problem, simple, child relevant problem, and a feeling like sad and angry, frustrated, something like that, disappointed, confused. And then the action is the main character's attempt to solve the problem. The consequence is actually the second character's assistance to solve the problem. But when they're young, we don't really make a differentiation, at least not with an icon. But at this point, they should be able to, okay? So we then clarify that the consequence is the direct result of the action, usually the secondary character's assistance. And the ending is what happens after the problem is resolved. And then of course the end feeling is like, you're happy if the solution is there, right? This is a really simplistic formula, but it's designed for teaching, okay? To give kids the basic structure of stories. So if we do want to teach language complexity, there's a lot of options for that. This is a blitz story, level B. So it has, notice the icons across the bottom, character setting, problem, feeling, action, ending, and end feeling. So that means it's a level B, right? And this particular story is, it's probably a C. No, it's not. It's the E. Whatever. It's one of our blitz stories because it has both temporal connections and causal connections, okay? And the story has those elements in there so that you can get the kids to be using those elements, right? We want them to use complex language. We want them to use big sentences. And if they can do it in their oral language, they're going to understand it when they're reading it, right? And then eventually they're going to be able to write it, okay? Oh, there's what I was missing, the connection icons. The connection icons work for causal or temporal or other kind of connections like transition words and whatnot, okay? This is the lesson plan if we're gonna add causal and temporal connections to any other kind of lesson plan, we would use this add-on lesson plan. And really it's so simple. All you need to do is read through it and you can set it aside and do it. Because what I mean by that is that you're inserting this step 2 of the add-on lesson into the master lesson plan. So after you've modeled the story, now you look at the causal and temporal words that are in that story, and then you're getting kids to retell the story in the master lesson plan using causal and temporal words, right? So you basically just finish the steps of the master lesson plan. That's how the add-on lessons work, right? You just kind of like insert the critical piece into the master lesson plan and keep moving. So vocabulary, we can teach lots of vocabulary. You know my blitz stories? Well, they have lots of words in them. When we're doing vocabulary instruction, our 3 main focus areas are to create a word conscious environment. I don't want to just teach words, right? We do need to have systematic focused vocabulary instruction on specific words like general academic words and domain specific words, but I want to do more than that. I want to create a consciousness among the kids so that they're thinking, do I know what that word means? Wait, I don't know. I should go ask somebody, or I'm going to look for clues, or I'm going to look it up in a dictionary. So recognizing that you don't know the meaning of a word is the first phase of like being a word learner, right? And oftentimes we talk about them as like a comprehension strategy. It's just whether or not they can, it's called comprehension monitoring. That's the word I was looking at. When you're monitoring your comprehension, you actually know and you think, do I know this? Do I not know this? So that's what we're after. We're trying to teach kids to be conscious at that level. And then we also want to build linguistic awareness that will help students acquire new words, right? So the strategies of being able to determine whether they know or don't know a word, and then implement a strategy that's going to help them figure out what that word means, right? Looking for clues. So that kind of takes knowledge about language, right? And so they can talk about language, and those are metalinguistics. We need to empower them with the ability and strategies, and give them the vocabulary to be able to talk about words. All right, so in our add-on lesson plans, basically, there's quite a few of them that are about vocabulary, and they're different kinds. So I'm just going to show you, I think, one here. So this is a small group master lesson plan with the enhanced story structure, character setting, problem feeling, action ending, and feeling, right? That's not the important part. It's the blitz versus the classic stories. So if I want to use this add-on lesson plan number 60, I have to have a blitz story, because the blitz stories are the ones that have the vocabulary words planted in them. And remember, the black bold words are the ones that have the clues to support them. So I need to have those, and it needs to be, so that's that's a level B story. So it's not just blitz, but it's blitz level B. Okay. And in this in the add-on lesson plan, we have this clue finding step. It's just like with the temporal and causal connections. We take the critical step from the add-on lesson and we insert it right there after we model the story in the master lesson plan. And then you can see step 4 says finish steps of master lesson plan. And you want to make sure that the kids are using the sparkle words throughout, right? So this clue finding step is really simple and easy, and we have some amazing data that suggests just adding this little teeny step into our master lesson plan helps children, after just 12 weeks of intervention, be able to infer the meaning of words from context, words that they do not know, right? That's a huge skill, and we were super pleased with that kind of result in our research. So you can see this is an example of a blitz level B story, and I've circled the clues, right? And these are the words that have the clues, the black bold words: unkempt, liquefied, and sweltering. All right, also in the vocabulary lessons, you can add on, we call this a word journal. So to give kids practice outside, maybe writing the words. So it's important when you are talking about vocabulary that you don't just do it in a Story Champs lesson. Story Champs is a good place to contextualize and introduce the words, but they need more practice than just that lesson. Kids don't learn vocabulary by just like 1 or 2 exposures. So word journals will help extend that into the day. So if you're an SLP, you could give the kid a word journal and have him do it with the classroom teacher, or vice versa. Teachers can have a Story Champs lesson and then send the word journal with the SLP to work on these things more explicitly or more intensely. Anyway, there's lots of possibilities, right? But of course, this is all about teaching metalinguistics and flexibility in the use and the context of words. And keep in mind too that a lot of English words are polysemous words, meaning they have multiple meanings. And so you really need to work on words like that, in particular with our kiddos with language learning difficulties. Okay, so another add-on lesson plan that I absolutely love is about vocabulary is the Spot the Sparkle game. Basically what this is about is for classrooms or clinicians who have groups of kids working on words, right? Again, it's about word consciousness. So the poster, we put a poster up immediately following a lesson in which the sparkle words are taught. We want to put these posters up, and this is what a poster looks like. So cluttered is the target word from the story, right? It was in Bryn's melted mess, right? But there's a cloud of synonyms here too, so that it's going to help kids learn a cluster of words around semantic relations, right? So we have messy, crowded, untidy, littered, chaotic. And now the game is whenever somebody in the classroom hears or uses or sees the word cluttered, messy, crowded, untidy, littered, or chaotic, they can put a mark, like a tally mark, into this. Now these posters, there's a lot of them because a lot of words are embedded in our stories. I can't even remember, 100 something, 160 maybe, I don't remember. But anyway, there are a lot of words and they're all on the flash drive. And that's because not every StoryChamps user is going to have a use for this. And we didn't want to add the cost to those people who aren't going to use it. But if you're a classroom teacher or a special education teacher, these would be wonderful. You know how you have word walls? Well, have a sparkle wall, right? Because in this way, you're going to increase the visibility and awareness of kids thinking and talking about words. And you're going to be able to reinforce, wait, what's our sparkle word? I just heard you say it. Right? Oh yeah, I did. Right? So they can put a tally mark or they can write their name with a white dry erase marker if you've printed these out, laminated them, and put them up. Okay. So let's talk about writing, because heck, we want to move to writing, right? That's the reason why we want to, well, it's not the only reason, but we work on oral language first. And once we have a good firm foundation, the transfer to writing is very simple and easy. Dr. Peterson and I have multiple studies where we can get effects in writing for free. We never taught with writing, but we get improvements in writing just through the oral language modality. But if you're going to work on writing, you might as well use the same cognitive schema that we've been teaching. So that's what these are about. We have writing organizers for all the levels, you know, basic, advanced, enhanced plus, and advanced, so that the kids can get practice writing a story. Okay, so there's picture boxes, there's a rough draft, and in the rough draft, they write their sentences, add in sparkle and connection words, and then when they're done, they can do a final draft, right? And then there's even a writing check. They can exchange papers, or they can do it themselves as a self-check. Now, I love generating new stories. So we want kids to also be able to generate fictional stories. It's now we got to move into creative writing, right? We've talked about retelling a story that comes from StoryChamps. And then there's like telling a personal story, which was in those lessons, right? But now what about generating fictional stories? Well, there's lessons for those and materials for those. We use these story starter cards that are kind of silly and funny. We just give them one little scene. Sometimes they're fantastic, sometimes they're realistic, and then we let them generate their own stories. We provide the icons so that they have the structure to follow and they can generate each of those pieces. Prepares them for writing. We have lessons for them to generate them orally as well as generate writing. And there's a lot of variations because they can do it together, they can do it individually, lots of ways to do it. And there are 30 cards. So if you wanted to pass these out to your first graders, you got 30 writing lessons that you could have them do, or 30 oral to writing lessons. Anyway, the possibilities are endless. So let's talk quickly about information, because we want to move there, right? We don't want to just stop with stories, because what's really killing our kids is the informational text. And there's very little guidance for teachers and SLPs about how to get informational or expository language. So there are some differences between narrative and expository language that we need to point out, right? Expository content is more dependent on background knowledge, which means it's going to be really hard for kids who haven't, you know, experienced a lot or that don't read a lot, right? There's definitely more domain specific words in expository text and in expository even oral exchanges, and they're more varied and challenging structures, right? That's a little different than a story, because the story structures, remember, help us to make sense of our world and our lives, and we're exposed to them from birth all the time in every culture. But not everybody's exposed to the structure of an essay, right? Main idea, key details, cause and effect, compare and contrast. Those are structures that kids are not exposed to implicitly in their lives. And so it makes it a little bit difficult. It's also topically organized. Narratives are causally and temporally related. Those are kind of easy, but topically related, that gets to a point where the language skills have to be very high level to be able to organize the text, spoken or written, topically. So, but we begin with narratives before teaching exposition, because they are familiar and relevant. It kind of evens the playing field. We can teach things that are shared in both, that overlap, right? And we also have data that suggests that if we teach good narrative structure, teach kids to listen for patterns, right? And the skill of retelling, they actually do better when it comes to information retelling without ever teaching information retelling. But of course, we still want to teach it because it is a complex and difficult task. It's great for teaching metalinguistics that then they can transfer or use kind of like their assets now that they've got it. Now they've got the narrative metalinguistics. Now they can learn it in the expository much quicker. There's definitely tier 2 vocabulary, meaning those general academic vocabulary words, and we can train inferencing in narratives that then can be applied when they're exposed to exposition. So we have information retelling lessons at the large group, small group, one-on-one. And basically our procedures are exactly the same, but the difference is that we don't supply the passages, and that's because we believe that you should be drawing content from the child's curriculum, right? From that classroom, from the science and social studies content, right? So we recommend that you choose a passage that is appropriate for that child's grade level and content, right? Just one paragraph is enough, right? Because this is, especially if it's new, one paragraph is enough. You can build up to 2 later. Good sources of passages are also nonfiction books, like the Nat Geo Kids and Discovery Kids books. I love them because they kind of have like a full essay on one layout of things. It's like one set, main idea with some key details in it and some pictures to go with it. So that's great. There's also some really great content at coreknowledge.org, and you can download picture flip books for free so that you can get some beautiful, gorgeous photos that go with any of the content. So I try to push everybody there because it's the core knowledge kind of content, but they have everything for free, right? So you can just download them and use them the way you want. So that's where I draw my content from, okay? And then we have passage icons similar to our story grammar. We have main idea, key details, and main idea, and then multiple key details. And then we have a sparkle-like icon called new terms, and that's for the domain specific words that are in the passages. Okay, so I'm at a point where I just want to show you a number of other resources. So I'm hoping that Taylor and Mike have been dropping good links into the chat for you, but if you ever need to come back, there's a couple websites that are perfectly suited for these things. So languagedynamicsgroup.com. I would like to just say that Language Dynamics Group is really a dissemination organization. Sure, they publish story champs, but it's really about getting it out there. And if you notice, our website is so full. There's so much there. We have tons and tons of video demonstrations from our assessments to our interventions. We have recorded webinars, so you can always come back and watch them for free. We want to just disseminate this stuff. This knowledge, the stuff that I just talked about is so powerful, and it really changes the trajectory for kids who are struggling. So we want to make sure that the resources are available to you. A lot of times, good Story Champs users in the schools ask us like how to talk to their principal. Right, or the curriculum director of their schools. So over time, we've created mechanisms for you to be able to do that. Some of Doug and my articles are research publications we convert into infographics. So there's one here, Narrative Intervention, 10 Principles for Effective Practice. There's actually a published article in LSHSS that really outlines those 10 principles in detail. But if you want the Cliff Note version, there you go, it's an infographic. We also have this one about multi-tiered oral language instruction improves reading, comprehension, and writing. That's newly published in 2020. So I made an infographic to make it a little easier to digest because you're busy clinicians and teachers. You don't have time to read those research articles. So we're trying to give it to you in the easiest, best way possible. The Let's Talk About Story Champs was actually created by a group of SLPs who were trying to kind of petition their Board of Ed to purchase Story Champs kits for their schools. And they had been using it, right? And so they wanted to figure out what were the reasons why they were using it and why the board should purchase them for all the kids. Guess what? They were successful. Their whole district has the Story Champs in their classrooms. In grades, kindergarten, preschool, kindergarten, and first grade, and all SLPs. And then others are going to be more academic. So like the oral academic promotes reading and writing. There's actually a reference list on the second page. So if you want to go to other people's work, not our research, and that's just it, as Doug and I, we do research that's going to be clinically relevant right now. We're creating tools for teachers and SLPs to do today, tomorrow. right? Where other people do a fantastic research, we use their research and integrate it into the things that we're doing, but we're trying to convert that research into immediate clinical practice. So the do's and don'ts is a great little graphic just to remind you of all the things that you should do and that you shouldn't do, okay? And then there's just a research synthesis, and it actually, I'm in the process of updating it because as we get more research, we should add it to it. So check out the websites languagedynamicsgroup.com, and then Trina's Toolbox. Some of these are actually available on Trina's Toolbox, which is my personal website, and I have other non-LDG related products there that are free. I've got a lot of storybook vocabulary lessons. So if you love dialogic reading, then you're going to love that. I think I have 111 free downloadable lessons, other kinds of things like that that can support teachers and educators. And to the extent possible, they are free. And we're going to do the wheel, aren't we? We're going to give away some Story Champs kits. But if you don't get a free Story Champs kit today, then you can use this code webinar15 and it expires in about a month. Okay. Am I on track here?
Yes, Trina, you are on track. I show it is 4 o'clock Mountain Standard Time right now.
Okay, we're going to do how many Story Champs kits am I supposed to be doing?
Okay, so
how many am I giving away?
Yeah, let's give away 3 Story Champs, and you have to be present to win. So if your name shows up here, we need you to type in the chat your email address.
Okay, Hannah Seitz, are you here? So I'm going to just keep going, but how many am I supposed to do again?
Yeah, we're going to give away 3 Story Champs. So we'll give a couple of, so go ahead and spin 3. But again, if you don't respond within a reasonable amount of time, we'll need to respin.
All right, Amy Scott Waro. Oh, that's an interesting name. I'd like to hear you say it. All right, if you're here, stick your email in the chat. Amy Scott Waro. Okay, we'll do another one. Let's see if we got 3 people claiming their Story Champs kit. All right, Gwen Stout, I hope you're here. Okay, what should I do now?
Okay, Trina, hit the close button, and then up at the top, you'll see results 3 near your right down, just down a bit. There you go. So those are the 3 winners. So we are waiting for you to post in the chat. And if we don't get a response, we are going to respin.
All right, I'm going to spin. Respin. Yeah, people are waiting. And they're here. We want to get people Story Champs kits. Come on. We've got Friday to enjoy. All right, Alice Havsepian. Okay. All right, Alice, are you here? Are you here? I'm going. We're going to get somebody who's here. Okay, Carrie Cotelis, please be here. Please be here. Hey, Cody Stevenson. All right. Oh, there's somebody. Look, Cody's here. Yay! We finally have somebody here. All right, Cody, congratulations. Make sure you stick your email in there so that we can send it to you. Okay, we need 2 more people because only Cody has claimed his prize or her prize. Cody could be a girl, right? But it'd be awesome if it's a guy. Morgan Weber, and I only say that because we're in an education profession when there's not that many men. All right, Morgan Weber. Yay, Morgan's here. Woo! Okay, should I do one more and see if that person's here? All right, Cody's email's in. Okay, Kristen Ashley. We've got Morgan too. Kristen, are you here? Otherwise, I'm gonna. So Morgan is here and Cody is here. I've seen those two. Sorry, it's Morgan Weber. Right here, we've got Morgan.
Oh, it looks like we had the wrong Morgan, Trina. So.
Are you sure? No, we got an email, but it was just to the panelists.
Oh, gotcha. Yes, we are good. Thank you.
I see it, and I can see now that it's just to the panelists. So we do have Morgan Weber and Cody Stevenson, but I don't see anyone else. So I should do it one more time. Just confirm that I didn't miss anybody. Come on, big money, big money. All right, Amy Hardy. Is Amy Hardy here? Come on, Amy, be here, be here. All right, I'm spinning again because we got to get somebody. People want to get to their Friday night. Hey, Emily Lovett. Is Emily Lovett here? Some people who know Emily. This is always what happens, right? Emily. Ariella Ruderman. Please be here. I think people are getting tired. Oh, good. Wait. Ariella, give us your email. I think we found everybody. Oh. Okay, so Janai is saying, pick me. We didn't find her. Okay, I gotta go again. You guys are still in here. I'm sorry, I'd like to give everybody a story chance. I promise you I would. But some business people tell me I can't just give them away, all of them away for free. All right, Sidhu Matthew. I'm sorry if I slaughtered your name. Oh, I saw. Oprah, you're right. Oprah would give it to you all. Someday I hope to be as rich as her so that I can give everything away. I love that idea. Okay, no, still no. All right, Stephanie McGinnis. Well, I'm glad you guys are hanging on. No, Stephanie McGinnis? I don't even know how many people are on here, but there is a lot. So we're going to get through them. We go, okay, Sheila. I'm not going to say that in case I embarrass myself. It's Sheila, Butwill. Oh.
Hey, Trina, can I ask a quick question while we're looking?
Sure.
So a lot of people are wondering, you said a great place to get pictures, and I missed it also, but they're wondering where they can get pictures. You said it was right before some magazine options.
It's coreknowledge.org. Marjorie Eager. Do we have a Marjorie Eager on the group? I don't know how many people are on the call. This is crazy. All right, no Marjorie, I'm spinning the wheel again. Hey, Bonnie Kowalski, is she here? If you see your name on this list and haven't given us your email for this, then email us. Come on. Oh, wait, there's another Sheila. Anybody? Sheila Keyshawn? All right, I'm going to keep going. There's lots of people who want this. Wait, is Sheila here? Wait. I think I saw Kristen Ashley. Kristen Ashley just sent her email. And Sheila Keyshawn. So we got them, right? Taylor and Mike, did you get this?
Yes, so let's see. We have Sheila, correct?
Yeah, Sheila Keyshawn, right here. We have Kristen Ashley, Morgan Weber, and Cody Stevenson.
So I have, yes, I have that. Great.
Okay, I think we're good. I'm so sorry, everybody who didn't get one, but please use our discount code and come back. And certainly if you want to get a group discount, have a conversation with Mike, he'll set you up, all right? We really try to make it as reasonably priced as possible because we want it in every school, in every classroom. Thank you so much for your attendance today. You can always email me too. Did you put my email in the
Let me post that. And then also, Trina, we still have quite a few people on, and we have some questions in the Q&A. So if you have time and want to go through a couple of those questions, I think that'd be awesome.
Yes, I am happy to. I am sorry that everyone didn't get a Story Champs kit, but I'm happy to answer questions. So what can you filter the questions? Because there's like way too many things going on for me.
Yeah, let's see. Let me see if I can get a list for you real quick. 1 second. Taylor, did you want to pick out a couple of these questions and read them off to Trina?
Sure. A common question was, what if our students are in 3rd or 4th grade, but are currently at a 1st and 2nd grade level? Where's a good place to start? I think that'd be a good question for you.
Yeah, I think a level B story is the best place to start, but you might want to get past that quickly. So start at level B, do a couple lessons, see how your kids are doing, and then ratchet it up to C, D, E, F, G, H, I, right? Stay in those levels because that's where a lot of complex language is and they're going to need it. And then wait to go to a level J story until they're really good at all the language complexity, vocabulary elements, that kind of stuff. The other thing that I would keep in mind is that our stories are really designed for young kids. So if they're older, they might start to think that these stories are too cutesy. So the first thing you're going to want to be able to do once you've got kind of like the acquisition phase, once they understand the story grammar, then you can choose other stories that are more age appropriate or maybe interest relevant, and then identify the story grammar elements in there and have them retell those stories. So be on the lookout for those things.
Great. Maybe another question that was also asked several times was, what if I have really lower functioning students, perhaps with autism and different things? What's a good way for students who are really have very, very low language? Where should I start?
Yeah, so we actually have a kind of infographic about how to simplify story champs for kids who are emerging speakers or AAC users. There are a lot of AAC users who do a really great job with story champs, and it helps them build like complex sentence structures, right? Because they have something authentic to talk about. And so don't be hesitant to use it if you've got kids who can kind of put things together. But here are the basic I would say prerequisite skills to be able to do storytelling, okay? They need to have a repertoire, a consistent repertoire to get their wants and needs met. So do they make requests, right? If they're not making requests, you don't want to do story champs. You need to focus on teaching them how to get their wants and needs met. The second thing would be receptive language. Are they able to like point to things that you say auditorily? Like if you say them, will they hear it and respond to the auditory stimulus to be able to point to things and follow directions? If they're not doing that, then story champs is going to be hard to teach, and they should probably be working on more listening comprehension. Maybe some early receptive skills. The other thing that they need to be able to do is what we call, labeling, right? So can they talk about a picture or a scene or a movie? Can they at least give 1 to 2 words to describe something that they see? And do they respond to the social reinforcement? Like, yeah, that's right. That is a cup, that is a phone, that's a horse, a doggy barking, something like that. If they've got 1 or 2 words to be able to describe that, they should be able to do story champs in terms of storytelling, right? And then I might start with the level A stories, but you might only have them retell the problem, the action, and the ending or the consequence, right? And that's because that's the core of the episodic elements that make a story whole. You never want to start with just teaching character and only character, right? You don't want to isolate those elements. You want to keep the elements of the causal and temporal events, right? The links between them. So start with problem, action, consequence, or ending, depending on how you want to call it. And that way they can retell those parts, and they just have to do like 2 words if they need to. But when you're having the child retell and you're modeling it, I would emphasize the verbs over nouns. Okay, verbs are the key to a clause, and sometimes nouns can be implied, but if you don't have a verb, you don't really have the clause of the sentence. So focus on verbs. And those are just some quick, easy ones. But make sure you look at the handout for simplifying, because I have some other ideas and guidelines for that. And you're certainly welcome to email me with a specific question and giving me more information about your kiddo.
Thanks, Trina. Okay, I think last question on the opposite end of the spectrum for older students who are in middle school or other things, how can some of these principles be applied? And I've been kind of sharing with them to maybe apply the same schemas to larger texts and to the curriculum they're using in the classroom. What else would you add to that?
Yeah, definitely. That's the important part. You probably recognize that they didn't gain that knowledge of the discourse patterns when they were in elementary school. And that's unfortunate, but it's not uncommon. And so we've got to establish those as soon as possible and then transfer them to something that's of interest and relevance and meaning to them. So you don't want to use necessarily our cutesy little stories. They're going to be silly. But you might be able to get beautiful photos out of National Geographic magazines and have kids generate stories about that scene, and teaching them. You can still use the icons. They're not too much of a problem. It's just a structure, right? And it's just a framework. And then if they've got something relevant from their class that they're working on, then you can do that. But my only caution would be to make sure that the material actually has a standard schema or narrative pattern, because a lot of times once you're in middle school, it gets really complicated and they try to be like, fancy and stuff like that. And if they're reading chapter books, a single chapter may not have a full episode. It might not take you through the problem, action, and consequence. A chapter might just be developing the problem. The first chapter might have just been developing the character. The next chapter might be just developing the problem. And then the next chapter is an attempt to solve the problem. and some emotion possibly, and then it's inevitably the first attempt to solve the problem isn't going to work, and so you got to wait a couple chapters to be able to find out whether a solution, was provided. And that's kind of what makes good literature, because you're motivated to keep reading because there's a cliffhanger, right? It's all about episodic features that are left off. So I just want to caution you that you've got to make sure that whatever the kids are reading at whatever grade level actually has the pieces you're trying to teach them. Okay. Next. Is anybody left? I don't know.
Hey, Trina, one question just popped up in the chat. Joanne's having difficulty accessing the core knowledge website to view the free flip books. Can you confirm how to do this?
Well, I would probably have to, I would probably have to find them because they update their website all the time. You might actually have to create an account to be able to access their free stuff. And I do know that that's true. You do actually have to create an account. But it's free, and I just get periodic emails from them. So I probably wouldn't be able to find that right now. Yeah, they have a lot of content on their website, but I would create an account, and then I would look under, I think they're under science, under their knowledge curriculum, under science and social studies, at least that I remember. I apologize. If you email me, I'll look further and try to send you a link, but I don't know it off the top of my head.
Okay, I think that clears up the questions in the chat. Anything else you see, Trina or Taylor?
Oh, somebody's asking a question about leveled text. Yeah, this is a really great question, and I want to make this point that when we're talking about early reading instruction, most often we're talking about phonics and decoding, and the purpose of leveled readers or decodables is for that. But keep in mind, what kids can decode at kindergarten, first and second grade is far below what their linguistic comprehension capacity is. So the books that you use for decoding practice are not academic language. They're not loaded with academic language. Therefore, it's not appropriate to work on comprehension at the same time as decoding using the same text. All right. This is why we use Story Champs as an oral language supplement with those kids at that age, because decodables are too simple. The language is too simple, right? We need complex words, multisyllabic words. That's what their oral language vocabulary can handle. And so we need to have different texts for those things, all right? So I do not work on those things at the same time. The only time that might be useful is when they're late second grade into third grade, when the demands on their oral language increase and they have the phonics knowledge to be able to read those multisyllabic or morphologically complex words, right? That's the only time that I would now merge them together, okay? And our stories are not designed for phonics or decoding practice, and they are not books. Okay, they are to be read by the teacher or interventionist, and so kids listen to them. This is about listening comprehension, and which is the critical aspect of the simple view of reading. Remember, skilled reading requires decoding and language comprehension, basically. So they've got to have it in oral language modality, listening and speaking, before we can read and write. So lessons last about 15 minutes, but depending on the fluency of the teacher, the size of the group, it depends, right? So if you have a one-on-one, if you're doing a lesson one-on-one, they could be as short as 5 to 10 minutes and as long as 45 minutes. And it just kind of depends which lesson plan you're choosing and what kind of participant or child that you have. A large group lesson in a classroom, if it's a simple one, like maybe kindergarten, is 15 to 20 minutes, but as you go up, you're going to add more complexity, so it's going to take more like a half an hour. The important thing is that you want to get through that effective teaching cycle of new material, guided practice, independent practice in one session. So you've got to get it small enough and fast enough that they're getting all of that content into a single session. "15 minutes is fine, it's plenty time. And remember, there is the digital presentation that allows you to do remote lessons. It works really well. So sessions per week, I'm seeing this now, it totally depends on when and how you're doing it. More is always better. However, you don't need it like, I don't know, it depends. It totally depends. And our research has been in all different formats, right? So if I'm talking about a preschool teacher, I might do it in a large group 3 days a week and small group twice a week so that I can get those kids who are struggling a little bit more. If I was like a second grade teacher, I might do it just maybe 2 or 3 times a week, maybe even 1 time a week, but really working on the remediation with those kids in small groups more frequently, possibly every day. In some elementary schools, I've helped set up, you know, the walk to read where everybody's in small, flexible instructional groups for decoding work. And then on the alternate days, they do walk to talk, which is the same idea. You put them in flexible reading groups and you give them story champs intervention based on their language comprehension, not their decoding skills. So I'm not sure if I had time to read the question in full, but I think it's Katie asking about the problem solution text structures. I'll tell you what we've discovered is it kind of doesn't matter about, we don't really need to teach kids all the different types of expository text structures. If you notice, we only have 1 set of passage icons. We actually made them for like sequencing, for problem solution, compare and contrast. We made them, but guess what? They didn't really work. Kids were so confused by them, and it didn't really help them be able to retell the passage at all. So all we use is the main idea and key details, and you can arrange those icons in different visual formulas or formats. So if I was doing a compare and contrast, I would have a main idea at the top, and then I would put the key details next to each other, right? Compare, contrast, right? And I would look at them that way. A sequence, I might add like numbers 1, 2, 3, 4, right? Or first, second, third, or next, last, right? And I would add the connection words that have those, or the connection icons that have those with it, so that you can see how the connection words and the key details work together. First, it's this key detail. Second, it's this one. Third, it's this one. Fourth, it's this one. And then problem solution is actually probably more like an integrated with the narrative, because we have a problem icon, right? And the solution is the consequence or the action, right, to achieve the consequence. So if you're trying to teach that structure and you have like text examples of that, then I would probably use a combination of the story grammar icons and the passage grammar icons. I'm not sure if I answered that question properly though. All right, are there any other questions that people would like me to answer? Did you see any more, Taylor or Mike?
Yeah, Trina, I just got one that I'd love for you to answer. It says, I find that some of my kids are at the level B. I believe it's meaning for 4 number of icons, but frankly, the level B blitz are too complicated for vocab for them to understand. They can't decipher the story with the tier 2 language. One strategy I use is to use 7 level B icons with level A stories to balance this. Do you think this is a good strategy?
Yes, but the classic level B stories don't have the complex vocabulary in them. And so that would be my go-to. But I'm assuming if you've used it, you know that just those classic stories are much simpler than the Blitz level B. There's quite a difference in the language complexity and vocabulary in them. And then let me think. This the level B, there is settings. There just isn't an end feeling in the level A stories. So, I mean, it's fine. You can use a prediction. So like, let's say you use a level A story and you have the 7 icons that have a setting and an end feeling. When you get to the end, you might ask a prediction question like, what do you think, or how do you think she feels now that her problem is solved? Right. And then you can include the end feeling icon in it. So I think that's fine. And then I might suggest looking for alternate stories that may have that same kind of structure. I do have a list on trinastoolbox.com. There's a list of, I have lots of lists of books actually that are appropriate to teach story structure for different age ranges. And so I might choose one of the preschool level stories that have good story grammar in it, and you could use that as a supplement too, even though there's likely some complex language in it. But you certainly want to try to expand it and make sure that that your story is within their zone of proximal development. And it's not a problem that they hear the complex language. You just want to model it well enough that they can understand it and retell it. So yeah, the lesson plans for the dialogic reading, they're at Trina's Toolbox, and the tool that it's under is called Undergrads and Underdogs, because actually that's a project my undergrad students have worked on for years. And so there's some really great vocabulary lessons that they've been building, and they're up there for free. Yes, you can follow me on Instagram. My handle is actually Trina's Toolbox, and Twitter is Trina D Spencer 2. And I don't know, Facebook, it's just Trina Spencer, I think.
And Trina, we have a question. Would you list some books for preschool that you use?
Yeah, I'm gonna have to get on my website. And actually, why don't I just like share my screen really fast so people can see that. So you can see, so here's Trina's Toolbox. It's just kind of like a place for, you know, free stuff, right? And there's a podcast here about storytelling with kids with autism, some of my new projects, research. These great videos. You guys want to see Story Champs work with a kid with autism? That's awesome right there. Here's all the tools in the toolbox, different things that I work on. Some of them are commercialized or published and available. Some are not quite yet, but you can at least see some of the projects. The undergrads and underdogs lessons are right here. This is where the bookmarks, the free lessons are right here under bookmarks, and I explain what this is. And there's basically dialogic reading, like handouts and instruction, all right? So if you ever want to share them simply with somebody, they're right there. And then the storybook lists are here under the storybook profile system. So basically some colleagues of mine and I have developed a way to judge the appropriateness of books for different purposes and their difficulty. And so whether or not we've profiled a book that you care about, this is downloadable for free, even though I have to update the most recent one. It's like on my to-do list for the weekend. We'll see if I can get to it. But there's some, we have profiled over 100, I don't even remember anymore, profiled a bunch of books to determine what kind of list they fall into. So we have some books for toddlers under vocabulary, story, grammar, math, social studies. So some of the lists are kind of small because my books in our corpus don't address that. But there's a couple for toddlers, and this is the place where you would work on story grammar, because these books have kind of a character, problem, feeling, action, ending, right? So those are some. Muddy Paws is such a cute book. Just me and my dad. A lot of the Mercer Mayer books have really good story structure to them. However, I do want to warn you that they also have multiple attempts to solve the problem. So they may have one problem, but the little critter goes to everybody in his family to try to get help, and eventually he gets it resolved. That's the story grammar components. Lola Gets a Cat. The Penguin Who Wished He Could Fly. Those are great stories. I mean, look, even the 5 Little Monkeys. The other ones that I would recommend are down here on preschool. So I do have more books in these categories. Giraffes Can't Dance. That's a great book. I love it so much. Stuck Anything by Oliver Jeffers and Monica Brown. I really like those as authors. And Lost and Found is really cute. It's really great. Corduroy Loses His Button. These have good story grammar and narrative structure in them. Oh, if you want a beautiful, culturally diverse book, Drum Dream Girl. It's about, women's rights, some social justice stuff going on there, because no girl was allowed to be a drummer, right? So that's her problem, is that basically she's told that she can't play the drums, even though she's like amazing at it and wants to do that. So I have there's my suggestions for you. If you want to work on inferencing or vocabulary, science, math, we've got kind of lists there started. And as we profile more books, I'll add them to the list. I do intentionally seek books that have culturally and linguistically diverse characters or themes, social justice themes. So you'll see those sprinkled throughout these lists. Is that good?
There's another question and a comment. One comment is that they would love more writing curriculum since their curriculum is marginal. And then another question is, do you have a favorite phonological awareness tool?
That's a funny one. Okay, so there's actually quite a bit around phonological awareness. And let me just clarify, are we talking about intervention or assessment? Let me just.
Good question.
Yeah.
Not specified.
So I was about to answer for intervention, because there's actually quite a few really good, at least starting in kindergarten. Okay, so but it depends on what you need. There's the answers are like endless, right? But it is actually something that I've developed, and we've been doing work on this here in Florida. There's a curriculum called Path to Literacy, and it's for preschoolers, and we teach alphabet knowledge and phonological awareness. So at the end of the curriculum, at the end of preschool, they should be able to segment words and be prepared for actual decoding with text in front of them in the beginning of kindergarten. And, I'm the instructional designer of that, so of course I'm going to recommend it. But the version I've been working on for the last 3 years is not out yet, so we have to be patient. There is a previous version of Path to Literacy, and it's good, but I've made it better. But that's kind of the purview of researchers. We get to do that. We just keep making things better. There are other tools out. If you're going to teach decoding, and I would start with, there's so many, I can't even begin to make a recommendation. But whoever asked that, I would love to be able to answer that question in an email, because then I can kind of list it for you without having to like pop it up off my head. Because there's some really good PA stuff. What?
I believe it was Chelsea who asked that question. Okay, thanks. I just got her email. Another question, Trina, is, it says, is there a list like this for older kids? I assume it was when you were showing the list of books that you were showing from your website.
No, unfortunately, no. But it's funny because I do follow them, because I have a sixth grader. And so we try to like find all the cool books. I have to say, I really like Core Knowledge. The Core Knowledge Language Arts program is really stellar. And the primary reason why I would recommend Core Knowledge to everyone is that first, they incorporate the science of reading, and they incorporate the simple view of reading. So they understand, and really remember, it's led by Hirsch, and I'm a big fan of him. He really integrates language, phonics, and knowledge. And so you're getting a really good, well-rounded, literacy experience. And they offer, like, their materials are free, but, you can also buy them. They're really, they can be really expensive, but if schools are going to buy them and have the company ship them to them, they're kind of expensive. But I actually have been chipping away at them. What you see right here, do you see these in my thing? These are my Core Knowledge collection, because I love them so much. They are so, so good. Let me just, hold on. Let me check. This is one that my daughter just finished, Habitats and Change. And what's so great about them is they are written at the phonics level, but they have high interest and great vocabulary and content that kids need to learn, right? And that oftentimes kids with language difficulties never get the chance to learn because they miss their science, they miss their social studies. So I'm just a huge fan of the core knowledge work, and I kind of wish I was back in the classroom so I could do it because it just came out since I've not been in the classroom. I do want to make a suggestion. If there's still 100 people, if you guys would be interested in watching a short video clip of me working with this boy with autism with Story Champs. Does anybody want that? Okay, good. Then let's do it, because this experience with let's see, Stuart is his name, was a really interesting one. I didn't know him, and I was visiting. Oh, sorry, I just clicked the wrong thing. I don't want that podcast. I want the videos. But anyway, I was visiting one of my former supervisees, and I was giving some feedback in his autism center. And I was just kind of watching this kid during his therapy session. He was at a applied behavior analysis therapy session, and his clinician is right here, his behavioral technician is here. And the speech language pathologist came into the classroom and said, you know what, I'm new to Stuart, but guess what? There's a goal on his IEP for him to be able to retell a story. And she was like, I have no idea how to teach that. And my former student went and got the Story Champs kit, right, and brought it to me. I did not know Stuart. So this is the very first interaction I have with Stuart. And we sit down and I'm like, hey, I want to tell you some stories. So that's what this video is. Can you guys see it?
One day, John was riding his bike down the street because it was his favorite thing to do. He rode his bike and accidentally crashed into a rock. John cut his knee, right? He was sad because the cut hurt. Thank you. Then John ran home and said to his mom, I need a bandage. She put a bandage on his knee. After he got a Band-Aid, John's knee felt better. Yeah. So look, right here, this is his character, same character. That's right, and John is our character. This right here is a problem. Say problem. That's right, problem. And look, his problem is that he crashed into a rock. This is feeling. Very nice. Say high five. Thank you for saying that. This is action. Say action. Right, action. And that's right, that was his action. He asked his mom, I need a Band-Aid. This right here is ending. You say that. Ending. Very good. Okay, you ready? You're gonna now tell this story. Good, right here. John was riding his bike. Did you hurt your knee or did John hurt his knee? You hurt your knee too?
I need a Band-Aid.
Okay, I want to hear this story about John. You tell me this story. Start right here. Who is the story about? Who's the character?
John.
That's right, John. Now say, John was riding his bike down the street. John was riding his bike. You say that. John was riding his bike.
John is riding his bike.
Right, down the street. Okay, say down the street.
Down the street.
Excellent. Okay, tell me about this picture.
He crashed into a rock.
That's right, that was his problem. High five, where'd he go? How did he feel about his problem? He felt sad, that's right, he felt sad.
I need a Band-Aid.
That's right, John said, I need a Band-Aid. How did the story end?
His Band-Aid was really better.
So he felt better because he got a Band-Aid. Say that, he felt better
He felt better
because he got a Band-Aid.
because he got a Band-Aid.
Woohoo! Stuart, way to go. Stuart, you're doing awesome. I'm gonna try to trick you though. You think you can do this? Do you remember the story? Okay, tell me the story about Stuart. Or not about Stuart, about John. You're Stuart. We'll talk about Stuart's story in just a minute. Okay, cool. Tell me the story about John.
John is riding his bike.
Great.
He hit a wall.
Fabulous. He felt sad. Okay, he felt sad
He felt
because he cut his knee.
because he got his knee.
Very nice. He asked his mom.
She asked him, I need a band-aid.
Very good. How'd the story end?
Because he was a band.
Yeah, he felt better.
He felt better because he had a band-aid.
One more time. Ready? We're gonna hide these. Okay, tell me the story. Look at me. Tell me the story about John.
John was riding his bike.
That's right. He was riding his bike. Okay.
He crashed into a wall.
He did crash into a wall.
He said,
That's right. He felt sad.
Mom,
He asked his mom.
I need a band-aid.
That's right. You say, I need. He asked his mom. He asked his mom.
She asked for a band-aid.
Okay. How'd the story end?
He said, because he had a band-aid.
Stuart, are you ready to tell your own story? Okay, look at me. Say, I'm done telling stories right now.
I don't have a story.
Okay, thank you. You did a great job. You can play with this.
Okay. Anybody want to ask any questions, or do you want to see the next 5 minutes that happened after his break? More, please. You guys are funny and I can't even hear you. That's funny. Okay, so what happened is I gave him a quick little break, right? And we came back and did the generalization phase. Now that was like a 5-minute session that was the retell portion of a one-on-one lesson. Okay, now remember, this kid was really saying like 1 or 2 word phrases that were kind of like not even contextually appropriate before this lesson. And what was happening is his teacher, his SLP, the ABA therapist, and parents were kind of in the off camera, like jaw dropping, okay? Because they had never heard him speak in full sentences like this. All right, where am I at? I gotta share. So then he's going to tell his own story. And I am at this point realizing that he can do quite a bit on his own. And so I'm like pausing a little bit more, seeing if he can generate some novel sentences, which he does, and trying to get him to use the word because. So you'll see some complex language coming from him that's very generative. And that's what I'm really after, right? So I want to reinforce anything that he can generate independently. I'm just kind of like accepting and recasting. But if he can't really generate it on his own, or if it's incorrect, then I might model it and have him repeat me.
I want you to tell me a story about you, a time when you got hurt. And I'm going to draw your pictures. Tell me about you.
I hit my
What happened?
hit my
You hit your knee? Were you riding your bike or a skateboard?
I was riding my bike.
Okay, here, look, I'm gonna draw a picture of you riding your bike. Look, that's our character. There is Stuart riding his bike. Now tell me what the problem was.
I fell into the crash.
Oh my goodness, you crashed. Look at this. Was it a rock or something else made you crash?
I laughed.
It was a rock? All right, there's your problem. Look at that. Okay, how did you feel about this problem?
Because I hurt my knee.
Were you sad? How did you feel?
Oh, sorry. may have some other Wi-Fi users.
I feel sad.
Because you hurt your knee, right? Say, I felt sad.
I feel sad because I hurt my knee.
Very good. Look at that. That's a feeling. Not so sad. Here's
Sorry, I'm having some buffering issues.
do it. All right. What did you do to fix the problem?
I need a bed.
He said, I need a Band-Aid. Have you noticed how animated my face is? And I'm trying really hard to give him social
Okay,
reinforcement.
did you tell somebody that?
I need a bed.
Who did you tell?
I need a bed.
Did you say, Mom?
Mom, I need a Band-Aid.
Okay, here's Stuart asking his mom for a Band-Aid. Okay, and here's your mom with a Band-Aid. Okay, that's your action. That's what you did to solve your problem. How did the story end?
Because my feeling.
I felt better
I feel bad.
because I
I'm sorry, my Wi-Fi is not working
got a
here.
Band-Aid.
Because I get a Band-Aid.
All right, say it all together. Say, I felt better because I got a Band-Aid.
I feel better because I had a Band-Aid.
Way to go! Excellent, excellent. That was fabulous storytelling. Okay, Stuart, can you tell me again without my help? Do it all by yourself. Use your pictures here.
This is good. Why? Because
Say, I was riding my bike.
I hit a wall.
Say, I was riding my bike.
Because I hit a wall.
Okay, copy me. I was riding my bike.
Because I hit a wall.
This one, I hit a rock.
I feel sad.
You feel sad because you hit a rock.
Mom asked you for a Band-Aid.
Oh, very nice. You asked your mom, can I have a Band-Aid?
Can I have a Band-Aid?
Nice. And how'd the story end? I felt better. Say, I felt better
I feel better because my Band-Aid.
because of your Band-Aid. Way to go. We're gonna try to do it one more time. No pictures. Can you do it with just the icons? Gotta make sure that looks like the ending. Okay, tell me your story. Who's the character in this story? You are. You are. Say, I was riding my bike.
I was riding my bike.
Good.
I hit a wall.
That's right.
I feel sad.
That's right.
I need a Band-Aid. I'm so happy.
You're happy. All right, good. Okay,
Help.
look, Stuart, one more time to me without these. All right, no help. Tell me, look at me and tell me your story. Remember, how does it start? I was riding my bike.
I was riding my bike because I hit a wall.
And how did you feel?
I feel sad.
Yeah, you felt sad because you hit a rock. Okay, and then what happened?
My mom gave me a Band-Aid.
Awesome. And then?
I feel so happy. The Band-Aid made me feel better.
Awesome. That's terrific.
So the last sentence was the Band-Aid made me feel better, which was a sentence that I never modeled, right? So it was 100% generated by this kid. Anyway, it was the teachers and the SLP were pretty impressed. I mean, I didn't really have much to compare it to, but Story Champs is a fun, easy way to get a lot of language from kids really quickly. So, all right, what next? Any more questions?
I see one question. Do most kids sit and repeat this many times?
Like in the same session, it's designed for them to retell it several times within the session. So what you saw was a typical one-on-one intervention session, right? Retell is the first half, then we transfer it over to generation. And they do. The point is for them to practice retelling that story several times with fewer and fewer visual supports so that it makes it easier to do, but yet it transfers to like the listening, short-term memory load, right? But if the question was about whether they practice that same story, the answer is no, right? We don't want to repeat the stories because of our multiple exemplar training. We need to have multiple stories. And there are 12 classic stories, and there are 12 blitz stories, and then there are 2 levels of classic stories and 10 levels of blitz stories so that they can be repeated, and you can do cycles. So like if the first time you use a story, you just teach story grammar, then, and after you've done 12 lessons, then you come back with the same first story. Now you can layer on language complexity and or vocabulary, or, make it a writing lesson, whatever you want to beef it up the next time around, that child sees that story so that you're not just teaching them to memorize the story. I don't know if that was exactly your question. You can specify again or clarify if you need to.
Trina, I don't know if I'm fully understanding the question. It says, okay, so the number of stories will just depend on the time you have. I'm not quite sure what that question means, but
I think what they're asking is whether you do more than one story within a session or a lesson. And the answer is no. We actually just do one story, right? And every session or every lesson gets that one story. And then you model it, team retell it, then individual retell. It kind of depends on if you're large group, small group, or one-on-one. But the point is that the visual supports fade, right? As they become more independent with that same story, like you saw with Stuart. He told the same story. Now, the generation side of it, they can tell a story about themselves, right? But a lot of times that's a really hard task, especially if this is the first time. So we accept them basically retelling that story in first person. And that's the reason why they're written in a realistic fiction genre, is so that kids can relate to it. And they likely had a similar experience that happened to them, right? And so we want that kind of like quick transfer to their own experiences. And then they learn the language that's useful for them immediately. Like they could go home and tell their parents that story, so. You don't really need to do makeup sessions because you can always differentiate in lessons, right? And you can always like teach like tailor prompts and feedback and whatever to the individual kids. So it's kind of like wherever they are, they just go, we just do the story. And this kid could be telling really long, complex sentences. And this other one is just getting out 2 words for each picture. That's just fine. This doesn't really matter. And they don't need to have the stories in any particular order, and they don't need to be exposed to all of them. There's no criteria for that. It's kind of like, it's the higher level skills that we're after that are transferable across stories and content. That's what we're after, that metalinguistic level of academic knowledge. Yeah, I hope that, okay. All right, you guys seem to be engaged, and I'm happy about that. So what process, Karina, which process? Oh, I think you're confirming what I said. Yeah, about like teaching the storytelling at a higher level, not telling a single story. Right, exactly. We want those the academic language, we're teaching that, and academic language needs to be generative. It needs to be listening and speaking, reading and writing, right? Those 4 like inputs and outputs have got to work together. And if we don't teach it at that meta-linguistic level, we're only teaching this one little carve, you know. And honestly, that's what's so powerful about Story Champs, is we teach it in a way that produces generative language, whether it's written or whether it's oral, whether it's expository or narrative, vocabulary, whatever. So yeah. So as Karina was saying that she was shocked that the kids had troubles retelling. And yeah, retelling is a very difficult, complex skill, which is the reason why we use it. But it's like the easiest of all the complex skills, which is the reason why we use it, right? It integrates cognition, memory, executive functioning, all sorts of things. It's very complex, sophisticated, and integrated. And so it's not surprising that kids can't do it, but that's why we teach them, and they can learn it quite rapidly. I do not have very many examples of me teaching more advanced stories. And the reason for that is that they like students and schools and teachers become very protected of kids' time. And so it's often only the preschool teachers that'll let me in their classrooms and have access to their kids during the school day for videos. It's also the reason why my videos are so old, right? So I apologize, but it's kind of like what I can get, I'm gonna get. So if you do lessons with older kids and can take some videos and get permission to let me view them or show them to people, that'd be awesome. I'm always up for that. But that is what happens, is the teachers become pretty protective about their academic time, and they don't want videos, you know, to interfere. So somebody's asking me about screening, and actually I didn't talk at all about our assessment tools, but there is actually a screening tool, a universal screening tool for preschool to 3rd grade. It's called the Cubed, and it's free on our website. So download that. Try not to be overwhelmed because it is huge. You will get tons of stuff. There's screening plus progress monitoring tools for each of the grade levels, which means up to 25 equivalent forms per grade. That's just listening comprehension. Plus we have the same equivalent for reading comprehension. And the tools are the quick and easy, takes maybe 2 minutes to assess child's language comprehension. So definitely download those and watch some of the other webinars that are recorded about the Cubed. And if Doug's still on here, I don't know, he probably had to go somewhere, but if Doug's still on here, you might hear his voice on the video demonstrations, and he often does the assessment webinars. Fortunately, Doug and I work really well together. I'm the queen of intervention and he's the king of assessment, yet we challenge each other very well on both of those fronts. So you as the consumer get the best product. So. We try to share as much as we possibly can. Doug and I have day jobs, like we're not dependent on this little company, but we want to disseminate our research to as many people as possible by making it useful, putting useful tools in their hands. So I'm glad you're here spending Friday evening with me so you can see how the tools work. Go use it, download Cube, get to work. Let's work on this academic language with as many kids in this country as we possibly can. Yes, the Cubed is a comprehension tool, both listening comprehension. Actually, the Cubed has more than that. Based on the simple view of reading, it has a decoding tool and listening comprehension and reading comprehension. And they are very good. We have some research that just came out in 2020, led by Doug Peterson, my colleague, and we looked at the equivalence between our listening comprehension and our reading comprehension. So for children who are not able to decode fluently, right, we can still measure their comprehension by eliminating the decoding confound. And it's a really, really important tool, because we seem to get stuck in schools saying, well, we can't measure comprehension until kids can decode properly. And then we use oral reading fluency as their indicator of comprehension. It's not an indicator of comprehension. Don't do that. You need a comprehension tool, and retelling is actually your very best measure of comprehension, which is why it's so hard, right? And you need to teach it. So, and we have lots of papers on that topic. And, you know, obviously we need assessment to be able to get to intervention so that the schools, teachers, and clinicians know what it is that kids need intervention on. And so our cubed assessment, you know, like informs intervention and tells, you know, the users, I mean, it gives you so much data, even on vocabulary for inferencing, literal recall questions, it's got a ton of stuff. So that's why I said, try not to be overwhelmed, because there's more than you're going to be looking for. And I think sometimes that scares people, but it's just a ton of material that you can use to be able to pinpoint children's needs and identify like which classrooms are working on academic language. Like if you did a screener class or grade wise, you would see class differences, because some teachers are doing a good job of teaching comprehension or academic language and some are not. And that tells you something, right? You need to beef up your tier 1 instruction in terms of academic language. And if you've got a classroom that the majority or at least half of the kids are at benchmark, then you could be working with the particular kids who are not at benchmark in small group instruction, and then beef up their academic language so that they can perform well on those 3rd grade state assessments that we're talking about before. So we've got to prepare them young so that they can have years of confounded oral language benefits, so that when they're in 3rd grade, they can pass those high stakes tests. Does anybody want me to stop? There are still like 83 people on this, and I'm wondering if these are the people that have like turned their computer on and walked away. At what point do I teach modifiers? Well, whenever my kids are ready, right? That's the trick. Like there are some modifiers I would teach to preschoolers, and if the kids know story grammar pretty well and like they can do causal and subordinate or causal and temporal connections, then I would teach modifiers, right? How to use adverbs and adjectives. I don't call them that. I call them sparkle, right? I'm just going to add a sparkle right here before this word or after this word, so it tells me more about this thing, right? So was it a big apple or was it an apple, right? We can teach modifiers that early, and I think it's a good idea to start young and, you know, small, easy, and you can add them on whenever your kids are ready for them. Yeah, so the storybook profile system, I see that question, is kind of designed to assess or evaluate or profile, really, it's profile a book appropriate for like dialogic reading, right? And even though we use like this narrative intervention where it's all oral storytelling, we don't really use books, right? That doesn't mean we don't believe in dialogic reading or shared storybook reading. We absolutely do, but that's kind of to us, that's kind of like standard practice. Like every pre-K 1st grade teacher should be reading to their kids. Every parent should be reading to their kids. And we want to, you know, we use the storybook profile system to help make sure that the teachers and the parents are choosing good books for their purposes, right? Because sometimes, you know, books are too difficult or too easy, and then they're not actually giving the kids the dialogic benefit that they could. But in Story Champs, we created our stories because what the schools need is something more intense. The effects of dialogic reading take a year, right? It takes a long time to make any improvements, and it's just not explicit enough, right? And so we actually have some research that we're working on right now where the control group did shared storybook reading using my undergrads and underdogs outline of dialogic reading, and Story Champs was our intervention. And you know what? The control group, or the active treatment control, which did the dialogic reading, they didn't change on their story retell, even though that's supposed to improve story retell and language skills, right? It didn't really improve them. And that's because Story Champs works so much faster and so much more intensely. So I would say you need all of those. but don't underestimate story retelling at all. Like, it's very, very powerful, and kids learn rapidly. Oh my goodness. We have people from Australia. Oh, I'm so happy. There's actually quite a bit going on in Australia around storytelling. I love it, love it, love it. And my kids, I just applied for a Fulbright to go to South Africa, and my kids were so mad at me because they wanted me to go to Australia. So, but whenever the coronavirus gets under control, I will go to South Africa, and I'm going to study multilingual storytelling and storytelling with AAC users, so augmentative alternative communication. So it's in my future. I can't wait. But this is darn Rona. Can't get rid of her. So the generation section of our lessons, when kids are like maybe, when they first start story champs, they often have a hard time like coming up with their own story, right? So for a time, we let them tell that same story in first person. And that's important because they get practice using first person grammar and pronouns, right? And they learn how that story is told. And I've never worried about that because kids will always eventually go, hey, that happened to me once. And when they're comfortable, when they know the structures, when they know how to do it, they will apply it to their own lives. Never had troubles with it. And in fact, we have, let's see, I have 2 completed research studies that we've done since we've been in lockdown with coronavirus. And they were with kids with autism, and we have some really remarkable results on reading comprehension and writing with kids with autism. And they received their intervention remotely. So like some really great things. We also monitored personal generations. Personal generations was another really big outcome that we get. And they're actually talking about their own experiences. So it does happen, and we don't have to worry too much about it, but we let them kind of mimic the retell story at first because it makes it easier and less daunting. Yeah, we're definitely after spontaneous language. So anytime a kid gives me something that I haven't modeled, but is like pretty correct, I'm gonna like definitely give it some reinforcement. I'm gonna accept it, and I'm gonna recast it if it was, I'm gonna recast it, meaning I'm gonna say exactly what the child said, but if it was grammatically incorrect, then I would recast it and fix the grammatical error so that they can hear it correctly. The reason why models work so well with young kids, like in the recasting, is because they're always striving to match what they say to what they hear. So there's a constant like effort to match. And so if the more they hear it correctly, the more likely they're going to be able to match it. So even if a kid and Stuart did that, he would say something, and he said like, he's sad or something like that, or I sad something. And I would say, oh, that's right, you were sad. Or he was sad because he got hurt, right? So I'm recasting, adding something to it, but I want to differentially reinforce or attend to anything that the child is giving me independently and spontaneously. Yes. I feel like we have a lot of COVID special studies that we've just converted to remote learning, but turns out our digital materials work pretty well. So we're happy about that. Of course, there's always room to grow, and Doug and I are constantly doing research, and I've got great students who are doing some really outside the box thinking to just improve what we've got for clinicians and teachers. So. But I love getting emails from people. I love getting feedback and suggestions. And most of the time when you give me suggestions, we're like, yeah, we're kind of working on that, but it's a slow go, research to practice is unfortunately a slow process. And so I am at the University of South Florida, and my undergrads are from all different disciplines. They come from College of Education, psychology, communication sciences, behavior sciences, occupational therapy. I get them from all over, and I run an interdisciplinary undergraduate class called Research in the Community. And what they do is they learn how to read books to kids, and then they volunteer in Head Start classrooms and read books. And I teach them the bookmarks. We use the bookmarks so that they have some scaffolding and the little lesson plans, and they choose 4 words to teach in every book and learn how to do dialogic reading. And they love it. And then half of them end up staying with me to do directed research, and then we can do even more, right? And I actually have 4 undergrads right now that have earned research scholarships. I'm so excited about them. I got 3 new ones this year, that 3 applied for scholarship and all 3 won. And the associate dean told me that they only give 3 in the college. And I was like, yes. So we do lots of great work here. Doug does as well. He's he's a full professor at Brigham Young University in the Communication Sciences Department. And I work at a research center, and I have appointments in child and family study and communication sciences and disorders. Good. Christy Austin, you want to come do research with me? I welcome it anytime. And actually, better yet, if you're in a school somewhere, let's just do research together, okay? Because we need the practitioners to be involved in research. They're the ones that tell us what questions are important, or like how to actually do it, right? Because we're trying to create tools that will work in schools, but we need the people in the schools or in the clinics to tell us what's going to work there. So. Oh, that's a great question about the deaf students. I have not done any, that's not true. Wait, that's so funny. I was going to answer that question wrong. So my master's student in speech language pathology, she graduated last year, and just this week, her master's thesis was accepted in an ASHA journal, and she did a Story Champ study with kids who are hard of hearing, and one had an aid and one had a cochlear implant. So yes, we have done research with that population, although that's the only study that I've done that I was involved with. But it worked great, and it was awesome. We did vocabulary and story retell, and it was just terrific. But I'm super excited for her because it's her first publication. I mean, she's a master's level SLP clinician, and she got her thesis published just like that. So yes, ASL, yes, I'm with you. I'm with you. Anyway, you could, oh good, somebody else uses Story Champs with their deaf students. That's terrific. I would love to see more, hear more about how you guys do that. And yes, AAC. That is my, what's the right word? That's an area that I'm trying to do more in, because so many good clinicians and teachers have been adapting the Story Champ stories for their AAC users. But I think I would be able to give them better stories if I created my stories based on core vocabulary that are already in their devices. Because that's the obstacle, is some of the stories have words that are not in the kids' devices. So I'm working on that. It's a fun endeavor. There may be times where we need people to, field test new stories. So you should just keep in communication with me. That works out. So if you want to get involved, please just email me. Like, that's the best way. And then we can talk about like what kind of things that are going to work in your setting, and what kinds of things you're interested in, what you need, right? I'm putting my email in, and then dpeter39@byu.edu. I think that's correct. That's Doug's email. He's in Utah and I'm in Florida. So if it makes a difference to you guys, yeah, that's okay. So we have a study going on right now where it's out of my lab in Florida. The coordinator for the study lives in California, The undergrads who are delivering the intervention are in Florida and New York, and our research participants live in Pennsylvania. So. Ooh, I would love to work in Canada too. I think Doug has worked really with, I can't remember which district. Mike, do you remember what area or city that there's a huge Canadian following?
You know, it's on the tip of my tongue. We have one in British Columbia that we're working with. So I'm going to have to pull up the name. I can't quite remember.
So sorry, I was gonna write this to Kalina, but I can just say that she's asking about dialogic reading and integrating story champs, and the answer is yes, right? So what you want to do is use story champs to teach the constructs of like story grammar, complex language, vocabulary, sparkle, whatever. So you teach those kind of like concepts. And then you can generalize them to your dialogic reading by saying, okay, well, who's the character of this book, right? And what problem do you think it's gonna, like, you look at the title, let's read the title. What problem might this character have? And let them predict what the problem could be, right? And then when you read the story and you get to the problem, you're like, oh, who found the problem? And oh, we didn't talk about this, but there's gestures with all of these, right? Kids, this is character, this is setting, this is problem, feeling, action, ending, and feeling. So there's gestures, right? And so when you're teaching, if you're using dialogic reading, you can have the kids doing the gestures as they recognize that part of the story, right? And then before you say anything else, like once you've identified the problem, you say, I wonder how this character, I wonder how Corduroy feels about his missing button, right? And then you're getting kids to predict, which is a very important inferential skill, right? You're getting them to think about and predict the relations between two story grammar events. Remember I told you that inferencing was the glue, right? You need to use the story grammar elements and the relations, causal and temporal relations, to help them make inferences. So have them predict what the character might be feeling, and then read it and be like, was our prediction correct? Did we figure it out? How did he feel? And sometimes the feelings are absent, right? And you get clues about how someone feels by pictures or something they say. They don't explicitly say, oh, he felt sad, right? And so you kind of walk them through that inferencing process by the types of questions you're asking. And then you could say something like, well, what do you think he should do to fix his problem? Right? And let them generate possible solutions. And I mean, there's all sorts of ways, what we know, what we want to know, and what the story tells us, like what's available in the pictures, that kind of thing, and help them through the problem solving. But they first need to have the cognitive schema of character, problem, feeling, action, ending, before you can really integrate those things into storybook reading. Woohoo! All right, so Ontario's rocking it. All right, Joanne. So, Joanne, you can email me too. Did I write yours down? Oh, that was a different Joanne. BCBA-D.org. Okay, I'm just making sure that I got your email, okay, Joanne, but please email me and tell me kind of like what you guys are doing, what your needs are, right? It's really hard for me to just like cold email people because there are such vast, diverse needs in different areas, depending on if you're an SLP or a teacher or a reading specialist, whatever. But just give me some more information to work off of, and I'll interact with around it. Yeah. So Caitlin's comment about kids with, who are hard of hearing, they just, the truth is all kids need something authentic to let them practice, right? And they have to have something, it's like we've contrived it, but we've contrived it in the most authentic way so that it'll generalize to more spontaneous language. And once they're doing it, you're just like, they're off, they've got it. So it's very intentional how we do this. So I'm glad that it's working out for you. Certainly, I mean, I'm getting, I'm gathering up some praises in the chat box, but like if there's something that isn't working for your students or that you need something different, let me know, because maybe we already have it and you don't know about it. Or B, maybe I'm working on it and I can give you like a pre-release version to field test. Or 3, I'll put it on the list and we'll work on it when we can get the money. All right, Ames. Let's see. Katie. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, there's a lot to do. With bilingual kids, there's tons and tons to do. And I think Story Champs is a great mechanism to build first language, their home language and English, regardless of their age. We have tons of mechanisms for that. So we would love to see how that works out in your sites. So it's good. Yeah, sorry. Mike put my Language Dynamics group web email address in there, and that's fine. You can do that, but you can also email me at my research, my university email. It's shorter. So. Well, it sounds, Mike, you want to know what it sounds like? It sounds like we need to be doing coffee chats, right? It's more of like a, where people can come back and ask me some questions, maybe make some smaller groups, maybe open it up to like some, maybe a geographic location or something like that, or, SLPs who work with elementary students versus SLPs who work with kids with autism. And maybe we could do some coffee chats about it. It seems like people are interested in just like keeping a conversation going. And I would enjoy that. So.
Yeah, that's a great idea. Huge thank you for the 50 people still hanging tight with us. So yeah, we definitely will explore that. And of course, Trina does trainings, virtual trainings through Zoom as well. So if you have any interest in doing a training session on Story Champs, Pearl, or Cubed, you can reach out to us and we'd love to engage you with that.
What's so interesting is sometimes these virtual mediums are so hard, right? It's so hard to just be engaged. It's easy to turn it on and walk away. But when we're talking about something that everyone's passionate about, and I know if you're still on this call, you love your kids and you're going to do anything you can to help them learn, right? It's not about you, it's about them. And that's why we're here, right? That's why I'm going to stay on too, is because I want to see these kids learn. It is incredibly reinforcing to see Stuart, right, talking. And it's incredibly reinforcing when I get an SLP who just went to my training and the next day she tries it out and the kid was able to tell his own story beginning to end. And the teacher didn't even know he could complete a sentence, right? That's really rewarding. That's what it's about. And we'll do anything we can to get those kids talking and reading and understanding, writing. That's what we want. And you guys are here with me because I know that that's what you care about too. So thank you so much. Thanks for what you're doing in the trenches. And I appreciate it. All of it. Oh, Katie. I'm so glad. It's like Dora, right? You're talking to the TV, huh? Yeah. I know the content I went through really fast, so people who just wanted the quick and dirty got it in 1 hour. It's a good thing I've given that spiel once or twice so that you guys could get it efficiently. But anyway, yeah, I love it. Born to be an SLP, right? Of course. It's just in our DNA. All right, are we good? Any more questions?
I will go ahead and put Taylor's email in the chat so that so if you're requesting a certificate, that is who you will email.
Okay, and my university email is Trina Spencer at usf.edu, and you put Taylor's in there, you're going to. Yeah, she had to jump off, but she's the one that you need to email. And if it just so happens, if you have any questions though, you need to email. If you have questions about purchasing, like sales or anything like that, getting group discounts, then you need to work with Mike, and he's the voice behind the curtain. I'm the pretty face, unfortunately for you. Oh, I am so sorry. I just discovered I've been giving you my university email and it's going only to panelists. I'm so sorry. I've done it like 3 times. I'm like, why do you keep asking me? There we go. Trina Spencer at usf.edu. I am so sorry that I didn't realize that it was only going to the panelists. And then make sure you use the webinar 15 discount code. If you didn't get a free one, that's the best you got right now. We'll try, we'll do some more. Okay, well, I think we should have a great weekend, right? Don't forget about the excitement and motivation that you have tonight on Monday. Don't forget, right? Think about it. Plan your Monday with your kiddos, or Tuesday, I don't know, whenever you can, but you can use Cubed on Monday morning. You don't have to wait for a kit to arrive in the mail. Use your Cubed, start screening your kids and figuring out who needs which lessons, what levels, and use your Cubed to form your groups, and you can get started. Okay.
Okay.
Right.
Thank you very much, Trina. So that concludes the webinar. And again, this was recorded and will be placed on our website. Give us a couple days for that. And we appreciate you attending. Good night, everyone.